There is nothing more intoxicating than the meld of emotions and sensations that is Friday night. Friday night is the sound of that crowd, the pride of that community, the way that that grass smells. I've never felt in my adult life the way that I felt on Friday nights. That's what those kids are playing for. They're playing for that emotion. They're playing for that brotherhood and all of that sensory input that comes from Friday night.
Happy New Year. Welcome back to another episode of Friday Night Addiction. And just the name in itself implies high school football, obviously, and that's what we do. We talk a lot about high school football on this show. But here we are, January 2nd, and the first episode of this new year is going to talk predominantly about college football because there's so much to talk about. There's a lot going on. And I said today's January 2nd. Transfer portal window open today. We had coaches changes everywhere. You got the college football playoff going on. You got bowl games happening. You got coaches on staffs who have already taken jobs, still coaching their team in the college football playoffs. You got coaches. It is a wild time happening right now. And, Jerry and I wanted to get on and talk about a lot of this stuff. And at the end, we'll tie this stuff in to recruiting. Will be the last thing we talk about. How this all, some of this stuff is happening is affecting recruiting, this transfer portal, and things like that, because it does tie in to high school football a little bit. But predominantly this will be mostly a college football show. So thanks for joining us. Merry New Year. If you're not familiar with Trading Places, the 1980s movies by Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd. Merry New Year to you and your family. I hope it was great. Hope you have a wonderful 2026, and it's even better than 2025. And whether that was good or bad for you. So, Jerry and I want to talk about the playoffs and kind of what's going on, and it's been exciting couple days, and you've had some upsets. And you've also seen some recurring trends and themes that now 2 years through the first two rounds of the playoffs, I think there's enough meat on the bone to talk about with the scheduling and the formatting and the buys. And I want to get into that just a little bit because not looking for any excuses. I think anybody who listens to the show knows I am a Buckeye and I'm unapologetic about it. Got our asses kicked the other night. Credit to Miami. And I'm a football coach and I'm a line coach. Most physical team wins. They deserve to win. If you get physically beat up, don't cry to me about winning. Like the game of football since the inception has been played at the line of scrimmage, right? Everything else is secondary. I don't care what receiver coaches tell you or DB coaches tell you. Everything else in the game of football is secondary. So credit to Miami. Played a phenomenal game. And really beat up on us. But not just that. I want to talk about, maybe some reasons why outside of just the obvious of the more physical team, but, the scheduling, the format, and how that affects everybody. Got some great points by Joel Klatt and Dan Lanning that we're going to share just because I feel like they made some really good points on some of this stuff, and, reference some stuff to Nick Saban as well because he talked about, the schedule and the system. So anyway, that's what the show's going to be about, and we'll get through it here. So Jerry, as we start, I want to talk about the playoff and the bracket, right, and the seating schedule. And there's a lot of controversy over letting in a group of 5 schools. Talk about the Tulanes and the James Madisons, and a lot of people were against it. And I was one of those people at the start of the college football playoffs. I was very much for it. I believe the little guy, deserves an opportunity if they prove it, or at least I did. I think I've changed my stance after 2 years. And I like the idea of inclusivity, right, for everybody and giving them an opportunity. But 2 years in, I'm going to tell you I've changed my stance. This is not college basketball. I have now seen these teams cannot compete against the schools that they're going up against in a 12-team playoff. They can't, right? It's not that they can't have a moment. They can't have a quarter, but they can't compete. The number of scholarships, the number of resources, the caliber of player that they are playing for a 60-minute game is just not. I don't want to get into what's fair and what's not, right? Fair is a place they judge pigs. But I would believe if you're going to compete, then you should have an opportunity to have some success. And I'm not sure how, James Madison, which was just a couple years ago, a really great FCS program. They're not that far removed from FCS. I've had a couple kids play at James Madison. Transition to Division I is still a really good low Division I program. They can make the playoffs in their first round game against number 5 Oregon. And anybody out there knows that Oregon is tied directly to Nike and Phil Knight, the owner and the originator of Nike. They have, and I can't even, saying unlimited resources sounds like I'm not even using the right words. But they have unlimited resources. Training staff, coaching staff, academic staff, sports nutrition, sports science, coaching, analytics, analysis, draft personnel, unlimited resources to make them the biggest, baddest football players in the world. And there's 10 schools or so that have what Oregon has. James Madison probably doesn't have a fourth of that. On top of the most obvious, they don't have the same Jimmy and Joes. And you're asking James Madison, or you're saying to them, congratulations, you had a great year. Go play Oregon. At Oregon. Here's your shot, little guy. What that's called is a lack of equity. Right? You're trying to give equality, but it's a lack of equity, right? Maybe I misspoke on that, but it's not apples to apples. And again, some people are going to argue James Madison put up 34 points, and they did. But anybody who watched the game, it wasn't close. And I'm speaking for Tulane, the same thing, right? Apply all the things I said to Tulane to James Madison, or I said to James Madison about Tulane. That was 41-10 to Ole Miss. Same thing. They don't belong there. They have no opportunity to really be successful. And I know people say you always got a shot. And I'm a coach. I've been in some underdog games and we won some of them, but it's different. It's different, and the levels matter. And so I don't know going forward if I'm a bigger believer in these lower group of 5 schools being included. Now, I do think that they're going to raise the college football number this offseason. I think it's going to go to 16 teams. And I think it's going to go to 16 teams because of politics. Notre Dame got left out. I am not a Notre Dame fan. And I really don't like the way Notre Dame does business. They like to be on their own until they don't. They want to be on their own financially because it benefits them. And then when they're left out of a group, they're the person in the group project who wanted to do no work and didn't want to be in the group, and now they're complaining that they got left out of the group. And I hate that about them because it makes them crybabies. So they're all pissed that they get into the end of the tournament. I believe they should have gotten in, but I believe they should have gotten in over Alabama. And I said that 3 weeks ago, a month ago, not yesterday, by the way. Let alone James Madison or Tulane. Nonetheless, but Notre Dame got left out. And if you understand anything about Notre Dame and the institution, the Catholic institution that it is, because it's not a school, it's a Catholic institution. If you understand that America is half Catholic in itself, then you understand that in every pocket of every state in the country, Notre Dame has a very large fan base. One of few schools to have that. So politically, this is going to change. It's going to change pretty fast. Notre Dame's never going to go 10-2 again and get left out of the playoff. Okay. The other part of that is that they're going to keep allowing group of 4s in here because the NCAA doesn't want to get sued. Because if you don't, then you basically got an antitrust going on, and you built a monopoly. You got an antitrust lawsuit because now you got a monopoly on the playoff system, And now you're not giving the group of fives another place to play, right? Another place to compete for a national championship like you do the FCS or you do D2 or D3 or NAIA. So now those James Madisons and Tulanes are going to gripe. And they're going to have an antitrust lawsuit against the NCAA and the Power 5 schools because you are blocking them from playing in the playoffs. So I don't believe the NCAA is going to stop the group of fives from playing. I think they're going to expand the field to make sure that they can get in everybody who they think deserves to be in and then put one or two group of fives in still. And I think the same result's going to happen to these group of fives. This is not college basketball. I think we just saw a couple years ago where a 1 beat a 16 in college basketball for the first time ever. And they've been playing the March Madness tournament for 100 years. And it's happened like once or twice now. Right? Like, but I don't care what you tell me. You're never going to tell me that a 12 seed James Madison is going to go to Oregon and beat them. Or an 11 seed Tulane's going to go to number 6 Ole Miss or Georgia and beat them. I don't believe that. Football has way too many physical components to it. Basketball has a skill component to it, and height is universal, right? Which gives you equal opportunity. You got as many 6'5" guys on a 12-team basketball roster at Tulane as you do at Duke. You got an opportunity. And there's 5 fouls in the game. You can only be so physical. Football is a game built of violence. And the bigger, faster, stronger the bodies are, and the more you have of them, you're going to win more often than not. I don't believe these teams have a shot. I've seen that now after 2 years, and I'd be in favor of giving them their own playoffs. I know that makes things complicated, and I don't have the solution, so I'm not going to go all the way down the rabbit hole. But I would be in favor of that. That way you don't get hit with an antitrust lawsuit. And those teams get to go play for a national championship on some other kind of level. Put that to the side. I don't think that's going to happen. It's going to go 16 teams, so somebody like Notre Dame never gets left off again. These group of fives will still be able to play. They'll get their asses beat. Nobody will care because they'll say they got to play.
Because we talked about this on the last episode where, there is a severe shortage of linemen right now.
Yes.
And you're seeing that firsthand with, Tulane and James Madison. The linemen just can't compete. And do you think part of that is with COVID and all that also had a little factor in it too? Or do you think it's still more of, no, these schools just have way more resources, way more everything, and the mid-majors just can't compete at all? Is it just a phase right now where we are right now?
I think the lineman thing, and we talked in the last episode, I think the lineman team affects Oregon.
You think
I think it affects Oregon. I think it affects Westchester Division II, Westchester University. I think it affects Division III, Delaware Valley University. I think it affects Division II, IUP. I think it affects Division I, Ohio State. I think there's a lineman shortage because there's less kids in the country playing that position. And the COVID kids, you kind of got a rampant number of them, COVID and grad year kids, because they stayed in school longer. So you had a little more linemen to go around for a couple years. They all had big graduating classes the last 2 years, and those are wiped out. And I think Ohio State is struggling to get as many linemen as they'd like to have or they've had on their roster in the past. I think the same is true for Oregon. The same is true for Tulane. I don't think that's the problem here, though. The problem here is that Ohio State, I'm just using them as an example, Ohio State may want to have 25 linemen. And right now they probably got 20. That's 5 less than they're normally used to having. Same thing would be for James Madison. They may be used to having 16 or 17, maybe 15, right? And now they're at 13 or 14, maybe 12, right? So they got the same problem. But who those linemen are for Ohio State or Oregon and who they are for James Madison is not the problem. The problem is in the numbers, not who they are. Because Ohio State and Oregon's are 4 and 5 stars. Tulane's are 1 and 2 stars or 0 stars. And it's the training and the level of player that they are that's the issue on the field. Not so much. I think the number is affecting everybody. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion.
Okay.
So, when we look at the bracket, so that's my deal on the lower groups, and then I think the first 2 rounds should be to be played on campuses. First round is played on campuses is a tremendous experience. We saw that in 2024. It was electric, right? Like, Indiana playing at Notre Dame last year, Tennessee coming to Ohio State. Like, it was an electric environment. Like, I think you should play the first 2 rounds on campus. I think the first 2 rounds of the playoffs should be played on campuses. There's no, and we're going to get to why they're playing them. The quarterfinals are being played, in the bowl games. And I got a video from Joe Klatt that Jerry and I are going to play. It talks about that. But I think they should be played on campus. So, you get a lot of upsets. You get Miami that literally, takes care of Ohio State. It wasn't a bludgeoning. Like, physically, it was a bludgeoning, but it was a close game. Ole Miss and Georgia last night was a great game. Went back and forth, two really good teams. Also playing each other for the second time, and I think that helps. It's hard to beat a team twice. You're going to find that out in the Oregon-Indiana matchup, right, in the semifinals. But you get Oregon and Texas Tech. Now, Texas Tech is famous this past year for spending all this money on this roster. They got this huge, billionaire booster who spent all this money. And they competed. It was 23-0. Oregon beat them 23-0, but they competed. Whatever. Good. Texas Tech had a great year. Kudos to them. You get Alabama, Indiana, which honestly, outside of Ohio State, like them getting a win, nothing made me happier yesterday than watching Indiana just physically manhandle Alabama. Now, anybody who watches the show listens, I'm an Ohio boy. I'm a Midwest boy. I got a Midwest fabric. I have been thumping on this table for Midwest teams, Midwest brand of football, which we'll get to later. But to watch Indiana do to Alabama last night, what they did, let's just say did my heart proud, selfishly. I'm not sure Alabama fans have ever watched an Indiana football game. Or I'm not sure most of them even know where Indiana is. I'm being honest. I'm not sure most of them know their way out of Alabama. Sorry. I lived in the South. Like, I know how these people think. Like, I'm not calling them lack of intelligence. I'm saying they're ignorant because they choose to be. Not because they're stupid. Right? Unlike a lot of people, I don't believe Southerners are dumb. I think they have a certain ignorance at times that prevents them from wanting to see other things. I don't think they turn on Big Ten football games and really understand what they're watching because they think that they're living in the kingdom of God in the SEC and nothing could be better than this. So every year they tell themselves, I'll get to that later.
Yeah, you're just getting warm.
But, so I enjoyed watching Indiana do what they did.
By the way, shout out to Bob Bosted, the offensive line coach for Indiana. My goodness, did they put on a clinic.
They did, and their offensive line won MVP yesterday.
Yes.
Like, how often do you see an offensive lineman win MVP of the Rose Bowl game? Like, incredible. Shout out to him. Shout out to that group of kids, which pisses me off. One of those starting 5 is a transfer from Ohio State. The other one's a transfer from Notre Dame. Like, but this is what Curt Cignetti does, and we'll talk about that later too. So, you had a good playoff system. Like I said, Miami deserved the win, and they got it. So in the semifinals, you're going to get Oregon versus Indiana. I think it's going to be a close game because they're playing each other for the second time, and Oregon has the horses to stay with them, and Indiana has to do it again. So I think that's going to be a good game. And then you got Ole Miss Miami, which I think will also be a really good game. Now that's a mess because of what's happening with the coaching staffs at Ole Miss and LSU and the players and the transfer portal open in the day. I mean, you literally have kids on Ole Miss's teams that are Ole Miss's current playoff team who are going to transfer to LSU. And they're playing in the national semifinal for Ole Miss right now with some of the offensive coaches on the staff that are current old LSU coaches. Because, they're doing right by the kids by letting those coaches continue to coach the kids, and that's the right thing to do. Give those kids every opportunity they can to win a national championship. And, I'm not sure if Lane Kiffin is doing it willingly, but he's allowing his offensive coaches who are going with them to LSU to stay at Ole Miss, at least in some kind of hybrid role now to continue to coach the offense, which is the right thing to do. But also it gets a little tricky because those staff they're coaching those kids to compete in the playoff, but they're also recruiting them, the guys that they want to come to LSU in a week when this is over or 2 weeks. You got to have a great game, I think, of Miami Ole Miss. I think I'm biased because they beat my Buckeyes. But, when I watch Miami do to Ohio State, tells me physicality travels. And they got it in abundance. And I think that might be too much to overcome in this whole back and forth. That game was not until the 8th. Transfer portal opened today. As weird as things have been at Ole Miss the last 2 weeks, they're going to hit they're going to hit Joe Exotic, Tiger King weird here in the next week with all those coaches doing double duty and LSU and portal opening. And it's going to be a mess. I think that'll be too much. I think ultimately that just the distractions will be too much to overcome for Ole Miss. I think Miami wins that game. I do think Indiana will win the shootout. Not shootout, but I think they'll win the rematch. I think it'll be a close game. I don't think it'll be like it was they played earlier this year. And I think you're going to get Indiana and Miami in the championship. So that's again, just giving my overview of the prediction. I want to talk about the seeding in the playoff and really what my gripe is. The seeding so much don't bother me. Like I said, I talked about the group before, the group of Pop 5, and again, I'm not sure we're doing justice to those teams, but I can get off my soapbox on it. What I really have an issue with, Jerry, is the seeding timeline. The fact that we seed these teams, the playoff starts, and then we don't reseed, which I would like. I don't think Indiana and Oregon should be playing each other. Two conference teams shouldn't meet right in the semifinals. If they're going to meet again, it should have to be either in the first round, because that's just how it drew from the initial seeding, or they meet in the national championship. Unless you have three teams from one conference in, then I get it. It's hard to avoid it. You can't avoid it. That's just me. I know people say in the weeds that might not be possible. I do think it is, but nonetheless. But here's my really big gripe, Jerry. Ohio State played on New Year's night. They hadn't played since December 6th. And I felt this, and again, I'm objective, and I think if you go back to our episode last year, after the national championship, I was talking about how I thought Oregon got the shaft. Ohio State played Oregon. Ohio State played the first round, and then they played Oregon in the Rose Bowl, and they blew Oregon out. Oregon had 32 days off last year as the number 1 seed and got blown out by Ohio State because Ohio State had been freshly playing football. And I thought that was a disservice to Oregon, so I'm not a hypocrite here. That layoff is a problem. It's a problem. And it's a problem. I'm going to use the term because we're trying to serve two gods. Joe Klatt uses another word for it, but he's describing the same thing. So I want to play that video right now.
The top 4 seeds in last year's playoff and this year's playoff are a combined 1-7 so far in this playoff. 1-7. Now, there are a lot of reasons to that, but I think the main reason is that we continue to play the quarterfinals on neutral sites. And Dan Lanning, after the Orange Bowl, went right in on that exact point. Here was Dan Lanning after the game.
Playoff, in my opinion, should have been played in Lubbock, Texas. I said that before. That's not because we wanted to go play in Lubbock. I certainly didn't. I'm glad we played here in Miami, and it was good prep for us. But, last year, very similar situation for us. I feel like that game should have been played in Eugene. And there's a lot of people that do playoffs. I feel like the playoffs have looked a certain way for a long time. We're trying to serve two purposes here. And the amount of time in between games, obviously, is tough for teams. We experienced it last year.
Yes. Everything he said is right. Everything that he said is dead on. We are trying to serve two purposes here. We can't serve the purpose of bowl season and do a playoff at the same time. We should play the playoff through December, and we should be ending by January 1st. We should be ending with the Rose Bowl. That should be the tentpole event for college football. I've said it for a long time. This version of the college football playoff, and everybody that has made the decisions necessary to create what we have right now, they have made the wrong decision almost every single turn. You can look at the way it's constructed, the schedule, the location, the presentation. This extends beyond the playoff. Just in college football, the transfer portal, the timing of the transfer portal. They always make the wrong decision.
I completely agree with him. 2 years now in the 12-team playoff system, Jerry. The 4 teams with a bye week, meaning more than 25 days off, are 1-7. Indiana is the only team who had the same amount of time off as Ohio State did, or any of the 4 teams last year. The 4 teams this year, the 4 teams last year, who won yesterday. 1-7. And I guarantee you, if we do it another year and we wait to see those results, only one team, if any, will win again next year. Because I don't know how any college football team can stay in game shape and game ready for almost a month. Especially a month that involves Christmas and New Year's. You got to let players go home for Christmas. You can't practice with a full intent of you can't scrimmage every week in practice for 3.5, 4 weeks. Like, it's insane. And it's insane because, like Dan Lanning and Joel Klatt are saying, you're trying to serve 2 purposes. You're trying to serve the organizations. I'm not talking about, notice I didn't say institutions. You're trying to save the organizations who have their names on these bowl games, the college administrators who want the profits from those organizations, and the timeline schedule that you've always operated under. The problem with that is that's directly counterproductive to what's best for the student athlete. You are putting their health in a bad place. You are putting their decision-making in a bad place because a lot of kids on those rosters have transfer decisions to make or draft decisions to make, and you're really putting a disservice to the coaches. And again, I think about the coaches last because the kids should come first, but you're putting coaches in a terribly bad situation by having to manage almost a month off in a very difficult time of the year to do it. You can't serve 2 gods. Either we're looking for the national champion and we're going to play and then we're going to figure out the bowl game situation, or we're going to keep doing it like this and we're going to put everybody in limbo. Right? And Nick Saban said this a couple days ago, and I've heard him say it before. The college football season schedule needs to change. It needs to change. You need to move the season up 2 weeks. The season needs to change. I think you have to do 2 things. You have to completely separate this. You have to put together the playoff teams, and you got to put the bowl games completely separate. They can't be the same entity. College football, the playoff and national champion should be done on January 1st every year. And preferably, I'd like the game to be in the Rose Bowl every year. Anybody else that thinks there's the equal venue, you are smoking something that they don't sell legally. The Rose Bowl is the greatest venue in all of sports, and every year on January 1st at 5 o'clock, the national championship should be played. That would require you move up the season a couple weeks, separate the playoff schedule from the bowl games. If you can mix in some bowl games with names on it in that alignment, that's fine. But the first 2 rounds should be on campus. Then you get to the semifinals, have it be a bowl game for the 4 semifinalists, and then the national championship at the Rose Bowl. Let's fucking go. And then put together the bowl game schedule. Right? Idaho Bowl, Snoop Dogg Bowl, Fritz Bowl, Pop-Tart Bowl. That one's kind of cool, by the way.
I actually
like now put that together, and whatever that schedule is, that schedule is. The hell with anything else. But you can't serve 2 purposes. You're completely screwing student athletes and coaches. And at every turn that they've had an opportunity to fix this and make a different decision, they've screwed it up. You have to change the schedule. You have to change. There's nothing wrong with moving the season up 2 weeks. Nothing. They start training camp the first week of August. Most Division I schools. They don't play their first game until Labor Day weekend. So start your training camp the last week of July. And play your first games the third week of August. It's an easy fix here. Now, and then separate your regular bowl games from your playoff structure. Let your playoff structure be its playoff structure. Jerry, I don't know where I got the bright idea to get this from. Where did I come up with this really bright idea? Because I'm so smart, and I thought of this all myself. And then I was like, I think at Division 2 and Division 3, they do this already. Oh my God, Jerry. At Division 3, the bowl games are played the week after the regular season ends. And guess when the playoffs are started? The week after the regular season ends, and they run on their own timeline. Oh, what a concept! What a concept! So you mean to tell me we could do two separate things and still everybody has a great time? You gotta fix it. You gotta fix it. You can't go another year like this. All right, so we'll move on because I could spend all day on that. And you know what? Let's just fucking make it simple. Make Nick Saban the president, chairman of college football, and let him do it. And make Urban Meyer the assistant or whoever, right? Guys that have actually coached the game, who actually have coached kids and talked to families and figuring out schedules and understand the draft schedule, understand the transfer portal window. Like, why don't we put actual people who have done the damn job and make them in charge of it? I'm moving on. This is going to get me fired up here. This next one's going to get me fired up. I want to talk about Conference Supreme. Every year. And this has been going on for I'd say honestly this started really strongly in 2006, 2007. Right? Where it really became who's got the best conference. Right? And I know that directly because Ohio State was involved. 2006, they played LSU. If you remember, Jamarcus Randall played LSU. They played the national championship down in the Superdome in New Orleans. LSU beat Ohio State pretty well. Then we started getting all the SEC, and then it happened in 2007. Ohio State played Florida in the Fiesta Bowl. Troy Smith won the Heisman Trophy that year, and Florida beat us pretty well, pretty bad in that game. And the SEC stuff got really louder. I know that for certain because I was in the South at that time living and coaching. And I heard it every single day. SEC. So from that point, from around 06, 07, it's hard for me to say, but it's just the truth. From around 06 to 07 to 2020, 2022, because I think Georgia went back-to-back in 21-22. SEC has been the more dominant conference. They have. I can't debate it. I can't argue it. They're the deeper talent pools. You and I have talked ad nauseum about that, where the talent is in this country. But that doesn't mean the best football. We've separated those discussions. They have a hard time separating it. But we've separated it on this show. But they have no doubt reigned supreme. Clemson's won a few in there. Florida State won one. Right, it's been a couple teams mixed in. But over a 16-year period, the SEC has dominated the national stage. No doubt. 2 years ago, Michigan wins the national championship in 2023. You start to see it. You looked at the college football playoff system, the 4 teams that got in, and you start to go, okay, I think the tide might be changing here. Michigan won it. Okay. Let's see. Then you looked at the bowl game records from that 2023 year. SEC had a losing bowl game record. They had a losing bowl game record to Big Ten teams. Then 2024 comes. Ohio State reigns supreme. They win the national championship. And run through the hardest playoff schedule anybody had ever seen. Right? Then you look at the bowl game records. Big Ten had a winning bowl game record. SEC had a losing bowl game record. Big Ten had a winning bowl game record over SEC teams again. So last year I was there. I was like, 2 years of proof is what I need, right? Like 2 years of proof to me meant that the Big Ten was the Supreme Conference right now. It could change. Another 2 year stretch happens. The ACC wins it. Well, I doubt that. But whatever. Miami, who knows? But it could go back. So I came into this year thinking we all saw with our own 2 eyes what's been going on the last 3 years, and it ain't been about the SEC. The Big Ten is playing great football. Now, we could talk about NIL and how that's evened the playing field. I think some of that's true. We could talk about the SEC for all these years. Yeah, they got the best talent pool in their country, in the lower parts of the country. But, they were paying players illegally all these years, and most Northern teams weren't. I don't give a shit what they say. They got coaches and great players who admit to it every day on TV. You got people like Cam Newton and other players that played in college, Charles Barkley. Like, SEC been paying players for decades. So we all know there's always been something to why these good country kids like to stay at home. Nonetheless, they still were dominant for 16 years. So I'm going to give them the credit they deserve. They got it. But I thought, we went into this year, and I thought, okay, we all got common sense, and we're all watching what's on the TV and what's in front of us. And what's in front of us has been the last 2 years, the Big Ten has reigned supreme. Well, then the football season starts, and I get all this SEC stuff again on TV every day. And then, as we're getting closer to the season ending, I'm getting even more of it. People are telling me, you got the commissioner of the SEC on national TV saying they deserve 7 teams in to the 12-team playoff. 7 teams. You have players who played in the SEC still on national TV as pundits now, as analysts, telling everybody basically to ignore what they see with their own eyes and believe that the SEC is still the more dominant conference in the country. I mean, I once heard a joke, and I call it a joke and not a riddle. It really should be a riddle, but to me it's a joke. And it said the greatest trick that the devil ever pulled off was convincing people he didn't exist. It's a joke to me, but it's a riddle. The greatest trick that's happening in front of our eyes right now is ESPN, who, by the way, is in bed with the SEC financially. That's where their TV contract is with that conference for the next 10 years. It was signed last year if you didn't know. So if you watch ESPN and all they're talking about is SEC team stuff, and when the playoffs are getting ready to be picked and what teams are going to be what, you got a lot of people on there talking about how the SEC deserves all these teams. I mean, it wasn't one show. It was a lot of shows. A lot of shows. There's only one show that I watched where they didn't do that BS, and that was the Pat McAfee show. Where Pat McAfee was like, I don't know about that. Like, they were in great a long time, right? But I watched the Josh Pate show. I watched Get Up. I watched First Take. Right? I watched College Football Live. And all I heard in late November was how all these SEC teams deserve to get in because the gauntlet of the SEC schedule. And this is what I heard specifically. If Ohio State and Indiana had to go through the gauntlet of the SEC schedule, they'd have 2 or 3 losses. Indiana just put Alabama's teeth on the curb and stumped their head in. But I was supposed to ignore what I've seen for the last now 3 years and believe what they told me. Well, the problem is in the SEC, their TVs don't work to northern channels. So the only games they watch is in the SEC because they're living in the kingdom of football God. And they don't need to watch anything outside of there because it's irrelevant. So they never even seen Indiana play. I can't imagine how many trailer parks got set on fire last night down in Alabama. They don't even know where the hell Indiana is. And they probably were even more shocked that they wore the same colors. They just said, oh, Indiana. Oh, yeah, Alabama be in the semifinals. You didn't watch them, did you? You didn't watch them beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. You didn't watch them beat Oregon at Oregon earlier this year. Because if you had, and you watched your team, you would have started to probably get a little uneasy. But they don't. Because they listen to what the pundits tell them instead of what they see. And it's not even what they don't see because they don't watch it. Whereas, you get a little further in the Midwest and North and Northeast and the West, and they kind of watch everything. So if USC's great one year, you'll have people out West going, USC's really good. But then they'll be like, yeah, but did you see Auburn? Auburn looks really great. You know why? It's called being fucking informed. Not below the Mason-Dixon line, though. Oh, no. Our analog TVs only have 4 channels. And it's Roll Tide, Roll Damn Tide, Roll Damn Tide, War Eagle. Whoever that playing that week is what we watch. Everybody else is irrelevant. So you get to the playoffs. You're getting your teeth kicked in. You want to fire your coach who has an 82% winning percentage or 85% winning percentage for his entire career at multiple schools, which means he's moved his feet and he's done it everywhere he's been. And you think he's the problem. I'm going to tell you, SEC, you didn't have an SEC dominance run for 16 years. I'm going to tell you the truth that nobody else will tell you. I'm your pastor. And I'm going to tell you what gets you into heaven, not what you want to hear. You never had an SEC dominance. You had a Nick Saban and an Urban Meyer dominance. Put that in the pipe and smoke it. Because if you take those two people out of your league over 15 years, are you still the most talented conference? Yeah. Because you got the most talent in your regions. But are you the best conference? No. Nick Saban put you guys on a pedestal. And you thought it was you. And what you're figuring out is the same thing that Bill Belichick figured out when Tom Brady went to Tampa Bay. It was him, not me. I'm saying all of that to say very directly and squarely, shut the fuck up. You're not what you once were, and it's okay. You may get back there. You may be back there next year. And then you go a couple years and we'll all have to bow down to the SEC flag again. Sorry, is that the Confederate flag or the SEC flag? Which one do they use, Jerry? Because they fly them in like most of the SEC states. But that's not who you are right now. I'm in my 40s. I'm older. I had too much weight. I'm losing my hair. I don't believe I am who I was at 25. I'm not that same guy. I don't look like that guy. My wife married that guy. She might be disappointed at the guy she sees right now. Like, it's okay. Find acceptance and move the hell on. You people are delusional. You're delusional. I'm tired of it. Stop. Kirby Smart's a great coach. I love him. I think he's a great coach. He's gonna. The SEC's not irrelevant. They're gonna be in it. I'm not sure how many other people in the SEC I feel are great coaches, but Sark's a great offensive mind. I guess Texas is in there now, whatever. But I'm just tired of the delusion, and I'm tired of you lying to me in my face, pissing on me, telling me it's raining. Stop telling me that my eyes don't see what they see. Stop telling me that you look like the pretty girl from high school and it's been 35 years and 1,000 cartons of cigarettes later. You don't look like her anymore. Put up a new picture. Just stop lying to me. Stop lying to me. Stop pissing on me and telling me it's rain. It's not. I smell it. It doesn't smell good. Let's talk about recruiting just for a minute. Portal opened up today. And I forget the exact numbers, but it is an enormous amount of teams or amount of kids in the transfer portal right now. There's only 3,500 spots of scholarships to be had. And before yesterday, that means before Division I guys could go in today, there was already 5,700 kids in the transfer portal. After today, they expect the number to be around 10 or 11,000 for 3,500 scholarship spots. So that's what's happening right now. Like, that is happening right now. I know because it's all over my Twitter timeline. It's all in my DMs. You know, there is so much going on in this that one part of it is, you know, kids are looking for a better home. Coaches do that, so I have a hard time criticizing the kids for looking for new homes, and especially if they don't like their opportunities. I think you got a large amount of kids that are just running from hard work and sticking it out and doing what's asked of them. That's just my personal opinion. And I think you have a lot of kids and their families, or not even their families, sometimes just the people in their ear, who think that their kid can get something more than they're getting where they currently are, or deserve something more than where they currently are. And most of those people are going to be left in sadness here come January 16th. The portal closes on January 16th. And guess what, Jerry? Unlike the spring, unlike the last couple years, there's no spring portal this year. We talked about this in our last episode. There's only one portal this year, and it's the 2 weeks right now, between January 2nd and January 16th. So 3,500 spots for what's going to ultimately be around 10 or 11,000 kids is going to leave a very, very large portion of kids sitting out or ending up going to an opportunity where they probably should have been in the first place, which is a lower level Division II or Division III. Or just giving up football. It's a sad, sad thing, what's happening. And again, I get people want to blame the NCAA and NIL and coach, like, or they want to blame the kids. You know, kids are greedy and they're selfish, and okay. But that's not the whole problem here. The NCAA let this happen. They let the floodgates get open, and they can't close them the same way that they closed them before. The water, the time to prepare the roof is when the sun is shining, not when it's already raining. And it's a mess. It's a mess. I don't know how else to put it. I'm hoping in the end that it benefits Division IIIs. That some of these kids, a lot of them end back up where they were supposed to be anyway. And they have to go tough it out because I think they'll be better people for it. Better humans and ultimately better football players. But I also think it's going to end up with a lot of kids just not playing football. I wanted to talk about that just because it's a real thing, and the numbers are real, and the lack of opportunities are real, and there's just a sheer number of kids that are looking for more opportunities or a better opportunity when there may be some deserving, and I think there is sometimes. I do think sometimes a kid goes to D2 or D3 and they outperform and they grow and they develop, and maybe they do become an FCS player, FBS player. I've just had that. I've just experienced that my own personal self with a former player who went Division II, probably was borderline FCS when he came out of high school, went D2, and guess what? He played 3 years at D2. He grew a little bit, developed a little bit, and he was a kid that went in the portal and found a home immediately at an FCS school because it was the right thing to do. He wasn't running from the work or becoming a better player. He did that for 3 years. And he grew and he developed, and he got his dream of getting a full scholarship. So, like, there are those out there. So, here's our last point of the day, and I want to really break this down, Jerry, and you can chime in, where you see fit. I know you have a background at the lower levels, at D2s and D3s, and I want to talk about this. And hearing a lot about Curtis Canetti for the last 2 years. Indiana came on the scene last year. It was his first year, and they had the incredible season. And they lost, they only lost last year 2 games. They lost to Ohio State, who won the national championship. And they lost to Notre Dame, who played Ohio State for the national championship. That his first year in Indiana, those were only 2 games he lost. He brought in like 57 transfers when he got to Indiana. Before that, he was the head coach at James Madison, who we talked about earlier, was an FCS program then. And he brought all these guys from James Madison to Indiana, and people said, hey, bring all these FCS guys here, and yeah, you're going to work, and blah, blah, blah. And got it. Leave that there for a minute. He goes on an incredible run the first year, and everybody really thinks he hit lightning in the bottle, right? He had some good players that were still in Indiana that were left over from Tom Allen. Tom Allen, didn't do a great job in Indiana, but he recruited okay for Indiana, and he had some good talent there. And Indiana is a very talented football state. I'm not sure a lot of people know. And they're right next to Ohio and Michigan and Illinois, and I think that helps. So, I think people just thought he hit lightning in the bottle. And last year, I started to think differently. I started to say, I don't think this is lightning in the bottle. I think there's something more to this. I just couldn't put my finger on it. And then I watched this offseason, after the 2024 season, and I watched him do the same thing in the offseason. He brought in a decent amount of transfers. And all the guys he brought in were guys that had played 2 or 3 years somewhere else already. Either he played at James Madison, he knew him from the time they were playing at those level, or guys that had played at other larger FBS schools who was tired of being the 5th lineman or the 6th lineman or whatever, and they wanted to be a starter, and they came to Indiana. But these were guys with experience at most of the positions he got them from. These aren't just new guys. These aren't just guys that never played before. These are guys that played either a lot of games at FCS or FBS, or they were great. They were big backups at big-time schools. And he did it, again, by bringing those same kind of guys in. They go this year. They beat Ohio State for the Big Ten Championship. They beat Oregon by 10 at Oregon, which hardly ever happens. But from anybody winning a game out at Oregon. They get in the Big Ten Championship. They beat Ohio State by 3, but they beat them. And now they just, they curb stump Alabama. And they're 14-0. So he's lost 2 games in 2 years. He's undefeated this year. They look like the national champion front runner for the semifinals and finals. And so I want to talk about how and why. Because I'm tired of hearing people talk about lightning in the bottle and luck, and I don't think it's lucky at all. So here's my theory. And if you don't know all of Cignetti's background, he was a long-time Division II coach here in the state of Pennsylvania in IUP, which is Indiana University of Pennsylvania. He only went up big time once to Alabama to be the receivers coach. He was a hell of a recruiter there and was a receivers coach. He and Nick Saban butted heads. He wasn't there very long. And he actually went back down to be the head coach at IUP again, and then became the head coach at James Madison later. But he spent a lot of years, his formative years. His dad was a coach, too. I think that's important. Mm-hmm. So he's grown up in football his whole life. But he spent most of his years developing his program, his system, and his formula at the Division II level. And anybody that's coached Division II or understands Division II football knows this. You get some really great players at Division II. Not a bunch of them, but some every year. But you have very little resources. Most of the time, you don't have a lot of full-time coaches. You don't have any full-time support staff. And what you do is you learn to do with less. You start developing a systematic approach to how you put together a team, a staff, a whole operation for your program. Cignetti did that for 25 years. He had 25-year trial and error with less resources, less talent, less money, less everything to perfect how to develop how to develop a program that when he moved his feet, he could take with him. He did not build his program based around talent, based around singular players, based around singular recruits. He built his program around talent evaluation and development. He has a systematic chart of guards can be this. They can be 6'5" through 5'11". Well, if you look at Ohio State's chart or Oregon's chart, a guard can be 6'7" through 6'3". And if they're not 6'3", no matter how good they are, we're not even looking at them. They don't fit the chart. Why does Cignetti's go to 5'11"? He's coached Division II football. 5'11" linemen come. So his chart is different than yours. He's developed that because he knows if I get a 5'11", 305er, I can still move a guy. And I probably can do it a little faster because he has leverage over a 6'2", 6'3" D tackle. He developed, develop polished guys as route runners. Didn't care about speed. Put no speed metrics on his boards. I want guys that can run the route tree. Because our offense, to your degree, can be complicated, so I need two things. I need guys that have played a lot of snaps or that can develop it. And I need guys who understand football at that position. Right? And he's done this at every position. I've seen the chart. He's done this at every position. So he's got all these things, but he developed these things at a Division II school. And he developed the formula out of necessity because that's what he had to do in order to compete and win. Because he can't count on the fact that he's going to get better players than every other school he's facing every year. So he came up with a systematic approach that would allow him to be successful at Division II IUP or FCS James Madison. So after 25, 30 years of doing it at those schools and perfecting it, some administrator at Indiana said, let's give him a shot. Now I'm going to get into that more in a minute. Let's give this guy a shot. His famous line is, I've won everywhere, Google me. Right? And he's right. It pompous at the time, but it's right. But the lightning in the bottle, the lightning strike that happened with Curt Cignetti at Indiana is not something Curt Cignetti started doing when he got to Indiana. The lightning in the bottle strike, and this is the part people won't accept. The lightning in the bottle strike is the administrator that hired him. It's the administrator that overlooked the young hot coordinator at Purdue or at Nebraska. The great QB coach at Nebraska who's had a 5-star kid for the last 3 years. And the 5-star kid's doing really well quarterback, so the coach must be really great. And I'm not saying the coach isn't. I'm not throwing any shots at anybody. But those are the guys that we have seen over the last 20, 25 years get jobs. It's been a hotshot coordinator or a hotshot position coach that's gotten these jobs. They go in 2 or 3 years, and most of them fail. You know why? Because they've never led young men. They've never led grown men and coaching staffs. They've never had to sit down with grown men who weren't making $100,000 a year and say, hey, I know $15,000 is barely putting food on your table. But can you stay with me another year at IUP? We're going somewhere. Can you convince grown men to do that? Curt Cignetti did it. He talks openly about a couple guys on his staff that were way on his staff back at IUP. One guy at one point was only making $3,300 a year. And even at James Madison, the guy only made $15,000. The guy's been with him now over 15 years. He's at Indiana and he's making $190,000 now. He was able to get that guy to stay with him. That's not common. Because he developed the talent, he cultivated it. So he's had time in developing relationships with young people and different kinds of relationships and putting them in a position to be successful because he uses the formula. He's developed relationships with grown men who are really good coaches, but didn't have the opportunity because they didn't know the right person to get in at the higher level. So they cut their teeth and stayed at Division II and lower levels, but they're really fine coaches because they coach the details. And they coach the fundamentals. And they can coach the 4-star kid and the 0-star kid. He brought that guy to Indiana with him. When he starts looking for transfers, he's looking for guys that are smart, that have played a lot of snaps already, that can learn his system quickly, that can operate on efficiency, and that fit the formula that he already has perfected over 30 years. The lightning in the bottle is not Kirk Cignetti. I know a couple of Kirk Cignettis. The lightning in the bottle is the administrator who ignored the alumni and did not hire the great quarterback coach at Georgia and bring him to Indiana, where he's never recruited, never been before, never stepped in the Midwest, and said, go build the program and make us a winner. And I'm not saying those guys shouldn't get opportunities. Please don't misunderstand me. What I am saying, though, is if more college ADs did their homework, I mean, I'm not just talking about ADs because they don't always make all the decisions. They did their homework and they looked for the best coach, the best fit, who develops talent, who has a great system, great scheme, who's had great staff continuity, right? Where I can turn on any year's film and I can watch them playing things the exact same way as they've played them since they've been there 12 years or 15 years or 20 years. The relationships that they have with kids, how their kids feel about them, how their kids in the program feel about the coaches, and right, like all that stuff matters. What we have gotten into in this society and in the land of college football, we're all everybody's looking for the hot Ryan Day. Ryan Day gets the job at Ohio State, had only been the coordinator there for a couple years. Now, he had coached with Chip Kelly at some other places, and he was in the NFL as a quarterback coach. He was known as the offensive guru, but he had never led young men. He had never led a program. He had never done all the administrative things that it takes to run a program as a head coach. He had never led other grown men. So it's safe to assume he didn't have any leadership style yet. He didn't have leadership style. Maybe he didn't even have all the skills. Now, Ohio State hit lightning, and so did Lincoln Riley, because they did the same thing with Bob Stoops when Bob Stoops retired. But those are two cases. Most of them have failed. Most of them have failed. The hot young coordinator, hot young position coach, it hasn't worked out. So people keep asking me, how does Kirk Cignetti keep doing this? And I got news for you. He's going to keep doing it. Because it ain't built around players. It's not even built around resources. You just now given the guy resources and he's curb stumping Alabama with it. The resources are curb stumping Alabama. The formula is the formula. That he developed himself. And he sharpened it with a cast iron claw that he had to build himself. That is why Kirk Cignetti in Indiana is successful. And if more college administrators looked to hire coaches, young or old, because this guy's an older coach, if more college administrators sought the right coach, the right fit from the lower, and gave more opportunities to coaches coming from the lower level who have proven track records. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 years. I'm not saying they got to coach 25 years, but I think, a good coach that's coached, 8, 9 years, 10 years or more, that's proven that they figured out a way to do this and make it work, no matter what their players are or the resources all look like. Like, those are the people you need to give an interview with and have a conversation with. But a lot of times these agents are the people that are filling these job posts. It's not the AD is just calling the agent going, okay, who do you think? And the agent's giving him somebody on his roster. I represent Brian Hartline, receivers coach at Ohio State. Hire him. Yeah, I love Brian Hartline, best receivers coach of all time, going down to USF. I hope he does a great job. But once again, Brian Hartline only was offensive coordinator 1 year, really wasn't the full offense coordinator. And he's never led grown men. He's never led a whole program. He's led one position group. And it's been the best position group in college football, so give him credit. But those are the guys that collectively get the most jobs, not the Kirk Cignettis. Kirk Cignetti is not the anomaly. Those guys exist. Those guys exist at the Division II and Division III levels. We talked on the last episode about Jim Clements. We talked about the head coach at Harding. We talked about the head coach at Ferris State. Those guys exist. They exist. The Larry Cares existed before everybody noticed. He figured out a formula at Mount Union in Lyons, Ohio, up off the Lake Michigan. He figured out a formula. He worked it, and then when they did come calling, he was like, "Nah, I'm good. I'm gonna stay here," and built Mount Union into what it is. But it's the anomaly is not that Larry Cares are there or that Jim Clements or whoever. The anomaly is that very rarely are they given the opportunities. Cignetti's program is forged in fire. Fire, pressure makes the most beautiful things. You get a pearl, you get gold, you get steel. And he built it long and far away from when anybody was noticing. And yesterday, everybody noticed. But it wasn't built yesterday. That's why his facial expression doesn't change on the sideline. He knew it 15 years ago. He knew he had it. He was just waiting for the opportunity, and somebody finally gave it to him. So don't ask how we can get lightning in the bottle, and our program can be what Indiana, who's never been a football program in its whole existence, can become in 2 years. Ask why you aren't giving those guys the shot at doing it. I'm going to end it there. Hope you have a great New Year's. I hope that helps. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. A lot of talking, yelling, cursing. I apologize for the cursing in advance, but this was a episode I was passionate to get in and do. Enjoy your new year. Have fun. If you're coaching, you got some guys out there in the portal, reach out to them, make sure they're doing the right things, and they got the right guidance. They got the right people in the area to look for the right stuff. So have a great new year. We'll see you guys soon.